Okay, we're gonna see if that works. Oh, looks like it is. Perfect. Let me know if my audio is all up and good. I'm just going to whip up some circles. Actually, I can probably just get away with drawing two and then copying it. Hello, hello. Well, that's only going to draw me one. Oh, and there's the wrong layer. So first things first, we're going to be going over some classical shading techniques. And these are way too big, but that's okay. Poor little computer is sure thinking real hard. That spacing particularly matters. Okay, so some of you have likely heard of some of these particular ones. They show up a lot in those how to draw or how to do pencil shading books. Art class teaches them. If my pencil decides to work, there we go. It's got a little bit of a delay going. It's got a little bit more than a small delay going. Let's try that again. There we go. So the first one we're going to look at is hatching. So if we're assuming our highlight somewhere here, then it gets to about midtones right about here, and then it gets darker at the bottom, we're going to go with our standard kind of top lights coming in this way. And we're going to do the same on all of them. If you have to turn your page or rotate your page, feel free to do so because I find for me that helps out. My arm only likes to go in certain directions. So hatching is essentially lines to indicate shading usually going in one direction or following the shape of your object. And you can do hatching either with build up, so you can start in on your darker. And I'm doing the one that's kind of following the curvature of this sphere here. And then as you overlap your pencil strokes, it's going to get a little bit darker. But the goal is to kind of be going in the same direction. And I'm actually going to make my pencil a little bit bigger. And then as you get to your light source, it's going to get a little bit uh, lighter, or in this case, thinner. Hatching takes a little bit of work to get the hang of. As you can see, I'm a little bit out of practice with it, so I obviously need to do a little bit more. And I apologize if you can hear my dog going nuts upstairs. But as we approach this light area, we want to be a little bit more cautious. Ooh, go away. Text tool. I want the rotate. Thank you. I will say the cleaner you can get to your edges, the easier your life likely will be. But if you can't, we have erasers for a reason. And if you want, you can use hatching to show your shadow. And I am adding a little bit more pressure as I get to this curve here. And I'm trying to keep my lines as parallel as possible. Ooh, and I see my pinwheel. There we go. I'm just periodically redrawing this bottom line where the shadow is going to be the darkest on our object, like when we went over the ambient lighting. And those videos should be posted. This is a little bit harder to do digitally than it is to do traditionally. I don't quite have the tools set up exactly for doing this digitally. Actually, Clip Paint might have been a better program for this, but we'll make do in Photoshop. I'm actually just going to open that up so I can see kind of what it looks like full size. This is the digital version of lean back and look at your drawing. And that first line I'd kind of drawn there, that's kind of where I'm going up to with this. So there's your basics of hatching, and yeah, it takes a little bit of practice. Um, get used to trying everything in one direction. Actually, I'm gonna put it on this guy. That's not the right brush. That's my oil paint brush. I don't want that. And if you're using pencil, you can try it a couple different times. I'm actually just gonna copy my little flashlight over. And if it helps you to do that, where you lightly mark out where your colors are or where your shading is going to meet, feel free to do that, and then you can lightly erase it with a gum eraser if you're using pencil. Wonder if this pen works a little bit better. Oh yeah, okay. So just to show you hatching in a couple different. That one got a little bit out of control. Normally I would try to do the entire thing in one stroke, but I think I'm zoomed in a little bit too close. Hmm. I'm definitely using a wrong color. We'll go like this. We'll pretend I'm using an H pencil to get my base hatching in and use a lighter gray. And then some of the strokes I'm going from the bottom up, which actually, because I know how my hand pressure works, I should be doing it this way because I feather a little bit easier on the bottom of my stroke than I do on the top of my stroke. Oh, and there goes the doggo. That needs to be darker. There we go. And these are going to be the test of patience. So this one would probably mimic charcoal a little bit better than this one, which would be closer to pencil. Now that I'm looking at it, we can add our shadow. And you could put your shadow going using the same directional hash marks as your shading if you'd like. And your shadow should be darkest at the point of contact and then going out. Yeah, hi puppy. So just to kind of show you a difference in you can bring your pencil all the way up if you'd like. And you could take your time, get it really, really, really smooth. And I'm not doing bounce lighting or anything in this. Briefly uh, we'll briefly kind of touch on some lighting effects, but that's kind of its whole other course. Because yeah, there's a lot that's going to be done in lighting. We're just gonna do the basics today. Okay, so our other one that we're gonna do is cross hatching. Oh, and I see I adjusted my settings. So again, cross hatching is kind of the same thing. I'm actually just going to draw in my darkest shadow and then I'll slowly work it up. Except instead of just one direction, we're going to be using a couple different directions. We're going to be crossing our hatch lines. I need to be using a bigger pencil than that. We're going to be crossing our hatch lines to add a darkness. Oh, I see that added a little bit of color. Whoops. There we go. Didn't mean to do that. Come on, Photoshop. Poor computer's been having a hard time the last little bit. She needs some serious RAM upgrades. So then for the cross hatching, we can go in a second direction. We don't want to cross over too much on the highlight portion. I'm using a little bit of a light pencil. But I can get darker right about here and probably smaller. So the more times that you cross over your lines, the darker they're going to be. Which, as you can see, is also definitely not my forte. uh, Being a digital artist, these are definitely something I need to get a little bit more practice on because I do use them in my sketches, but not for full surfaces typically. Should be practicing them more though. And the more space between your hatching, I'll just kind of show it off to the side here. Spinny pinwheel, there we go. Cross hatching, yeah, I see the the look. Um, it can be a lot of fun if you have the patience for it. I have lost a little bit of said patience. Yeah, so the closer your hatching gets, and the more you lay down, the darker it should start to get. I should actually have my thing set to multiply. That will mimic pencil just a little bit more. I don't know why it just went green, but it did. So then where was our lighting line? Around the middle there. And when you get a little bit more pen control is when it starts to get a little bit smoother and more practice, obviously. As you can see, my default line shading is definitely hatching if I had to pick between the two. Oh, there we go. Okay, mental note, multiply on brush settings, mimics pencil a little bit better than just going in with black. Actually, I wonder if I could find a Oop. Yeah, I normally do have quite a bit of patience. I've just been doing a lot of speed drawings lately, and that's kind of affected the quality of my fine shading because I've been focusing more on speed than I have on technique. So your cross hatching technique, and then one of the other ones we're gonna go over is oh, where's my little light bulbs? Let's bring my light bulbs down. Oh, and I didn't put his shadow. Ah, yes, okay. I've figured out how to do pencil in Photoshop. Finally. I can't believe it took me that long to figure it out. Actually, I'll go a little bit farther back since my light is kind of coming this direction. That's not necessarily a perfect example of how far that light would go, just because this is a rounded surface. Be closer to that, actually. Uh, Two other techniques you'll probably use or have probably seen is tonal and smudge. Just put those up here. I'm going to make an attempt to use my mixer brushes, and we're going to hope that it works for me. But I'm going to do this on a new layer. So tonal is instead of wanting to see your hatch marks, we want to gradually use the different. If you're in traditional, we want to gradually go from your sorry, my words are escaping me. Your H pencils up to your normal. There we go. You want to gradually go up from one pencil to the other. I should be using this one. There we go. I see it took on a purple tone while I wasn't looking. Tonal, I generally also kind of call it a fill method of shading where you're filling in an area and then you're slowly going over top of it. And this is where you try to get your shading as smooth as possible with one before you move into your darker pencil. And again, you can work from your darkest up to your light if that's what you prefer. I'll actually try to do that on the next one. But one of the points of, sorry, excuse me. One of the points of tonal is to try to, by hand, without any other tools, get your transitions as smooth as possible. Then I'm actually going to jump into a super dark and then I'll work my way back towards the middle. And again, I'm not doing any reflective lighting or bounce lighting. And one of the things that's hard to get over the fear of is going in there hard with your darks. See what it looks like if you hit it really hard with your darks. And I'm actually just going to, oh no, I won't. Okay. I was thinking I might copy this over, but I don't think I am. I'm gonna do smudge by hand as well. You need a ping button. Why do you need a ping button? So if I was doing reflective or bounce lighting, I would actually leave this bottom edge. Let me just undo this. I would leave a little bit of this lighter, but not as light as this, because most surfaces will reflect a little bit of light. Oh, was I talking about, oh, explain the different pencil types while I'm talking. Oh, yeah, I can go over those again if that's what you're looking for. So like H is your denser graphite, so that would be uh, these lighter ones because it's not leaving down as much graphite per pass of the pencil. So that would be as if I was on this lighter color because it's only going to get so dark. Sorry, I should put it on that lighter color. And because it's hard, it's going to be, if you sharpen your pencil, it'll be very solid like this. Uh, and the farther up in numbers, so say H6, I don't know if your pencil set goes up to H6. H6 would be like this, and then as you get to H2, it's going to get a little bit darker and a little bit softer, so you'll be able to blend them in together. You'll also find that the H's might not smudge together if you use a smudge stick because they're not leaving enough graphite down to smudge. And then if we go to an H3, would be about somewhere around there. Or an H4, I should say. I can't remember if they go up by single or every other number. It's been a little bit since I've worked with uh, pencil density, that one. And then your pencil tip will get a little bit softer and easier to, less likely to stay sharp. And then your standard HB would be your mid-tone. And then when you start getting into your Bs, that's when you're going to get more graphite left per pass, and those are the ones that your hand's going to smudge because they're leaving a lot of graphite dust around them as you work. If you have a paintbrush, you can use a paintbrush to smudge off your any eraser marks without smudging your pencil and any leftover graphite. And then as you get to 6B, it's going to get darker and darker and darker. So I think of it like hard versus bold is how I kind of think of it. There is a technical name, it's kind of escaping me right now. But if you're working light to dark, you want to work from H, higher H. This one is do do do. What would it be about? No problem. And I am kind of trying to mimic that as much as possible with with my digital art. Just that way you guys can kind of see what I'm doing. And they are transferable. The skills that you learn in traditional, you can take to digital and vice versa. It's just patience and takes a little bit to kind of relearn your tools. But when you see me kind of clicking off to the side here, you can imagine that like picking up your pencil before, so your lighter pencil, and using your lighter pencil to drag your darker pencil colors around, because they will do that to a certain extent. You can use dark to light to blend. Yeah, yeah, the pencils can get confusing when you're not uh, when you're not used to them, and they don't name them very well. Like, if you think they're calling them hard and soft, you'd think they'd write them as H and S. And if you think they were doing light and bold, they would have been L and B, but no, no. And again, there is a reason why they have them named that. I just can't for the life of me remember why. But it's probably something ridiculous. And then you can go around with your hard eraser if you'd like. Clean up your edges. And do I have this twisted? Nope. So then kind of going on that, if we imagine our lights coming down at an angle, or from one direction, our shadow should actually be kicking out to about here just very lightly. And this circular, so it's coming down here. I'm just going to lightly map out our shadow for tonal. Hardness and blackness, is that actually what it is, Shell? See, and yeah, that sounds right. I think I knew that. But yeah. So this little circle underneath our sphere that we keep drawing, that is what's called cast shadow. So the object above it is casting a shadow below it. And objects cast a shadow on themselves. So a little bit different from the ambient lighting that we were talking about last time, where we would just kind of shade, very, very lightly shade the edges if we were saying light was coming in from everywhere. With directional lighting, this object is casting a shadow on itself. So that's why down here is so much darker. And then it's casting another shadow uh, on the object below it, in this case, the surface it's resting on. So I added a little bit of what's called bounce lighting. And that's where, even though the light is coming in at this angle and this is casting a shadow, it's hitting over here and then it's then bouncing in a bunch of different directions. It's coming down here and it's bouncing up and it's hitting our orb sphere again. We'll go into more detail on that in a minute. But so yeah, tonal is where you kind of want your pencil strokes to be doing the shading for you as smoothly as possible. Or if you're like me and you like to see your brush strokes, then the F is fine point. Huh. That one I don't think I knew. Thanks for looking that up. Okay, and then smudge. This one's going to be fun. I'm going to need a new layer. Okay. Uh, uh, so I'm gonna work from dark to light this time. And kind of like what we just did, I kind of want my pencil strokes to do the vast majority of the work. And then if you don't have a smudge stick, a piece of Kleenex on the end of your pencil eraser works really well. So I'm going to do our one darker layer, and then I'm going to do the next one up, and then I'm going to start smudging them together, and I'll build them up that way. And your bounce light or reflective light should never be as bright as your highlight light. Should always be darker. If you do decide to put that in. If you don't worry about it. Lighting is probably one of the most terribly difficult things to get the hang of. So as I'm going in, putting in the darks, kind of starting to smudge it into the next, or use the tonal technique to get into the next one. Let me crank this down so it's actually somewhat similar to a smudge brush. And then we're going to start, that's a little bit hard. We're going to start bleeding those edges together. Actually do need that to be on. Damn it. Pardon my French. And you can do smudging after you put in all your... Ooh, that's not going to work because I'm still on my mixer brush. There we go. You can do smudging after you've already put all this in. That might help you out a little bit. I know some people who can just go straight into smudging. I seem to not be one of those people. Okay, now let's try smudging it. Except I want you way down here. So we're kind of trying to mimic pencil smudging. So if you go darkest to light with a smudge stick, you're going to find that you need to replace your smudge stick because it will hold on to a lot of graphite or charcoal, whichever you're using. Charcoal especially, it will hold on to a lot of. I'm trying to make sure I smudge kind of to the edges of my object. But because I did most of the work tonally shading, um, I actually don't have to do too much adjustment with a smudge stick or go back, which is good because that impatience thing that's come up a couple times. And one of the reasons why I said you can put it on the end of your eraser is because that gives you a little bit control. But if you like it better, you can put it put a piece of Kleenex on the end of your finger. Also works. The only reason I wouldn't recommend using your finger is your the oils on your hands will actually periodically make your pencil set, which makes it almost impossible to erase after. Speaking of, I'm going to go back in and erase some of my mess ups where I've smudged out of the edges. Oh yeah, that hand oils do all sorts of funny things to paper and pencil. I mean, it does work very, very good for smudging, but yeah, sometimes it'll make your pencil set. So when you take your time to smudge things out, I could see I've got a little bit of messery I could go back and clean up here. And I could sharpen my pencil really fine, make it really small, and get into all the nooks and crannies. Um, the other tool for pencil artists that would really help you out is I can't, what are they called again? It's a little block that has a bunch of sandpaper on it. You can normally get it, it normally comes in a lot of pencil kits. Cripes. I'm having a fun time with names today. But you can use that to go between having a really fine tip pencil and then shaving it off so that way you can get cover more area, have a more blunt pencil. The blunt pencil works a little bit better when you're trying to fill an area. I'm actually just going to use my smudger. I need to bring this back down. I can't remember where I had it. And I want to leave a little bit of my circle shape even when I'm smudging, otherwise it'll get lost. Bring this back in a little bit more because that's looking up, leaning back and looking at my page. It's looking a little bit not quite correct with that much white space, or negative space, I should call it, around the edge. Good evening, Dr. Smiles. And that is one thing to be careful of with when you're smudging is losing your shape. You want to try to avoid that as much as humanly possible, as it'll get away from you quick, especially when you're leaned in. You're really focused on making those smooth gradients. I am doing well. How are you? There's our hatching, our cross hatching. Tonal, smudge. I'm still on the wrong brush, so that didn't help me at all. There we go. Tonal, smudge, cross hatching. Oh no, if you're make sure you get lots of rest. Being tired's never fun. Delete that guy. And we'll bring our little light bulbs down for the rest of them. My light bulbs got into a little bit of a different position just because of how close I had put my spheres, but that's okay. I still get the gist of what I was going for. Oh yeah, they definitely got a little bit kiboshed there. Let me fix this really quick. And that white line there, that is a issue that you get sometimes with the digital art mixer tool is it's feathering out more than the actual layer can compute, which is where, yeah, it eats some of your shading. You can't quite understand where the layer ends. Do we have any questions on those four before I move on to the other four that we'll hit? And there is more than what I'm going over. Um, these are just kind of the more common that you'll see. Okay, so the other ones we're going to go over are everyone's going to laugh at one of the next ones, I'm sure. So we've got, ooh, come on, Photoshop, catch up. This is where I should probably save because Photoshop's having it's thinking quite hard. You're working digital and you haven't saved? Now is a good time. Okay, are you gonna work with me now? There we go. Maybe. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. I'm just trying to write a word. There we go. Stippling, there we go. Photoshop has caught up. So we've got stippling, we've got scrumble. That's an M, scrumble. And then we're going to do two digital art. We'll do cell style. We're going to do something interesting. We'll do cell style hard. What was the other one I was going to do? Fill, fill and build up. We'll also name this one soft cell style. Okay, so stippling, I can already tell you is going to drive me insane. Uh, all the power to you if this is your thing. Stippling is a major um, is something that is used in the art style pointillism a lot. This one I definitely do not have the patience for, but we're gonna give it a shot. So stippling is where instead of your hatch marks being your the closer together being your darker and then the farther apart being lighter, you're using a bunch of little dots. And I know some fantastic artists who do stippling, and your stipples can be any size you want them to be. So you can go large if you want, which I might just end up doing because this is one I yeah, it's not necessarily my thing. We'll put it that way. Actually, I should be using a different brush. Hard round. Let's do that one. Oh, that has zero. Uh, hmm. There's my transfer. and pressure. Lock. There we go. It's like, why is that showing up way darker than I want it to? So Photoshop might actually beat me up a little bit more on this one because it's going to start having troubles keeping up with how quickly I can put dots down. Stippling the dots you love. I'm just going to do it all in this same brush since I've pulled it up. Um, when I do stippling, which again is not very often, usually I reserve it for when I'm doing like facial hair on a character. I'll use it then. Um, I work in a zigzag pattern, an up and down pattern. Then I get a consistent dot layout when Photoshop cooperates. My computer right now is like, I hate you. I hate you so much. Oh, Zane, you're not allowed to adjust your brush size. Pencils can't adjust, so don't adjust your brush size. I'm trying to keep consistent to you guys. Yeah, there are millions of fantastic pointillism artists out there where their entire art is based off of stippling essentially, and it is absolutely gorgeous and not something I have the patience to do. One of my really good friends, Medusa Mystic Arts, does a lot of has started to get into a lot of pointillism, so I've been seeing a lot of really cool uh, gothic heavy metal artworks in that in this art style. We're gonna see how long I can go at this before I run out of patience and cheat because I can. No, I'm gonna try and not cheat. It's challenge mode. Oop. I'm not going to lie, I think I actually have an easier time doing this with traditional art than I do with digital art. And you can see as I lose focus, my dots become less consistent. I much prefer scribbling or scrumble, as it's called in the classical art world. Another place you'll see stippling is in comic books and manga. One of the things that digital artists use is called halftones, which is a bunch of dots that are either really close or really far away, or far away from each other, and they use that for shading. You can also get halftones in um, hatching and cross hatching. And how those used to be is back in the day before digital art, they used to be printed on these sheets, and you'd have to put the sheets over top of your line art and cut out each individual um, section that you needed for each little bit of face, and then you had to overlay them. So you'd get a bunch of dots that were far apart like this, and then you had to lay down both of the sheets of paper just staggered enough and then cut them out to make your shadow layer. And yeah, it's pretty cool. They used to also do that with color for the first color comic books. Was there would be a bunch of yellow dots on one sheet and a bunch of red dots on another sheet, and they'd lay them over top of each other or print them. Sometimes it was just printed directly like that, but they had to print each individual color separately. So now I'm kind of trying to fill in between I'm talking to distract myself, so I'm doing that on purpose. As you could tell with the hatching when I went a little bit quiet, that one's something I can do. I can turn my brain off and do hatching, and I can do tonal all day without having to think about it. Stippling's one of those things I kind of need to be a little bit distracted to do. Gonna turn that back on. Challenge mode, Zane. And again, if there's things that you find you just don't like doing, you don't have to force yourself to do them. There's no rule saying, hey, you need to learn all of these classical art techniques just because you want to draw. That's being aware that they're there is an option is good enough in my books. I know lots of artists who've probably never touched stippling in their entire life. So I can see in my navigator here, my lean back view, that I'm starting to get almost a solid looking line around the middle here. So I'm going to start kind of bringing that up a little bit to kind of make it less solid or appear less solid. I think I went a little bit hard up at the edge. That's okay. And as I put more weight into my pen, my dots get bigger because I have pressure sensitivity turned on. So I'm trying to keep it as consistent as I can. And so, like, again, for something like this, I'm not necessarily even looking at my big image here. I don't know if you can see me moving my pen around. I'm not really looking at this. I'm looking over here at my navigator because that's showing me a little bit more of a realistic view than my eyes kind of going a little bit hazy because I'm putting a million and one dots down. So if you have to do stippling lean back or if you have to do tonal lean back just to see exactly what your full image looks like, do it. Lean back. And now I'm going to try to put more dots down per inch. We'll see if we can get this darker just to get a shadow in there. Oh, that might have gotten a little bit too dark. Scrumble is going to be very much so the same dealy, but I find it much more enjoyable. And I'm trying to avoid dragging the pen because Photoshop is going to have fun with that. And then because I'm sure that my navigator is hard for you guys to see, I'll zoom out of this in a second. This was going to be the one that I'm not putting shading down for, or not putting a shadow down for. So that's just how much I enjoy doing this. But good challenge mode. So as you can see, it definitely looks like there's shading, and you can get as fine with your itty bitty little dots as you'd like. Okay, come back here, pencil. And I'm going to do this one on multiply because I don't think I'll be letting go of the brush. So scrumble is very much the same thing except scribbles. And for me, this is a lot more enjoyable. This is more like my warm up for every day. 'Cause I just do constant scribbles. And you can do circular scribbles if you'd like, circular scrumbles. You can do scrumbles in a direction and overlay them. Yeah, and this one I can definitely zen out to. Just brain goes off and scribble. Three, two, one, go. And then the more scribble lines that you have to get closer together, the darker it's going to get. Yes, I do. I will be taking a break after. Well, I mean, I could do a break after this one. They are dragging a little bit. Normally, I do my breaks about an hour in. Oh, yeah, so we're about half an hour past break time. I swear my internal clock is normally better than this. Um, and Scrumble, you're technically supposed to try to let go of your pen stroke as little as possible. I just kind of scribble to heart's content. That's the way I like to do it. Yeah, so scrumble is my oddly satisfying technique that I enjoy. And we'll do a 10-minute break, go get something to drink, and then we'll get on to these other ones. And what do I have on my list? And then we'll actually get into directional lighting. Be right back in 10 minutes. Okay, I am back. I've got my tea on the go in a glass cup because I am a heathen like that. Oop. Okay, so I am just going to kind of cheat because these are the digital art ones. That still has a purple tone. I need to take my saturation out. There we go. So we're just working in grayscale today. And let me know if my stream cuts out any because I'm watching my little blinker struggle a little bit. We're going to do the same thing over here. And then I'm going to lock the transparency on this layer because that's just going to make my life a little bit easier. So cell style shading is going to be the one that you see most commonly used in animation, especially hard cell shading, which it's actually very hard to do on a perfectly spherical object. It's a little bit easier to do on something that's got more dynamic feel to it. That might be a little bit too extreme for a highlight. Uh, and one of the reasons why you'll see this so often on digital digital art and animation, and again specifically animation's a big one. Oh no, that's not supposed to be on. Uh, is because it's really easy to animate these hard shadows moving. And then depending on how big your animation team is, they can you can usually put in numerous layers worth of shadows. And then I'm just going to unlock that really quickly. Actually, I'm going to put it on a layer below that. Said below. Call this our cast shadow layer. You might not put multiple layers in a cast shadow because that would just start getting a little bit difficult. I'll leave it. But yeah, it's your cell style is going to have those really hard, blocky edges. And part of reason why it's called cell style is because it was from cell animation. And I can just do like I don't have my shape dynamics or my size dynamics turned on my brush settings. And then similar to this, I'm going to just select my shadow, throw it in there really quick, and then I'm going to use a soft brush to blur it out. And this is your soft style that's a little bit more common in manga, where things aren't necessarily moving. It's also quite common in comic books nowadays, as opposed to the older style. See soft cell shading. That's a tongue twister. Say that 10 times fast. There's a little bit more smoothness in the gradation, but usually there's still a visible difference between the mid-tone, the highlight, and the shadow. Oops. I was going to do that in the cast shadow. And then if I was doing this just pure digital, I would go under a Gaussian blur. Oh, no, I don't want to do that layer. I want to do just this part. There we go. Gaussian blur is one of the tools we use to kind of blur out the edges of things quickly and efficiently. So that might be more of the style you'll see for manga and comic books. And then it also makes it a little bit easier to add in our bounce lighting. And if we were saying that, hey, it's sitting on a reflective, or this ball is reflective and it's reflecting some light back down. Except I should lock that layer. That's a little bit too much light because it shouldn't be brighter than the darkest shadow. We can also use our multiply settings to build up our shadows, and our screen settings to build up our highlights. So I mean those two are definitely quick and easy ways to go through it. And the next one we're going to get into is directional lighting, which we've kind of already been working with this kind of from the top. One of the reasons this is the most common directional lighting is because it shows the form of an object a little bit better, and it casts shadow as opposed to just a straight on side or front view, where it starts getting a little bit difficult to see all of these variations. Not going to work on that one yet. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to throw this. We're going to call this shading techniques, if I can spell. Need to hide you for a second to bring up my spheres again. And that is definitely not a color that you're going to be able to see because it's the same as the background. There we go. So we're going to do 4 different uh, types of lighting today because there's not quite enough time to do all the various lighting that we can. So when we were talking about ambient lighting, we were talking about light that fills the room, so it's hitting your object from all directions, it's bouncing off all the walls, hitting your object, and how we were still making our object look 3D. When we're talking about directional lighting, we're talking about choosing one specific light source that's hitting our object from a certain point. And there's 3 different ways you can think of your directional lighting. We can think of what direction it's coming in from. So if we have our orb, is the light coming in from here? Is it coming in from here? Left, right, somewhere around it, front, back? We can think of the height of our light. If we got our object, is it coming in from up here, down here? We pretend this is our horizon line. And then we can think about the intensity. So if you have your object and your light is right here and it's super bright, or is it way out here and it's got all the light has this massive distance to travel? Because if it's right here, you're going to have a massive uh, difference between your darkest part and your lightest part. It's going to be very solid and very, very noticeable. Whereas if it's back here, is when we're going to get more into that soft shading. and that gradation that we were seeing before. Mm, I want this one. So I'm going to let's take this guy. Actually, I'll take the one that I've already got light lines drawn around it. Watch Zane try to be a perfectionist. Doesn't need to be perfect. Just kind of trying to make it the same size. So the way I'm going to show you how I shorthand my light notes. So I'll draw a circle or an oblong circle, depending on where it's coming from. And I'm imagining a cross in the middle of my circle. So if I draw, for this specific light, I'd draw a circle kind of like this, and my cross would be here. And if I'm thinking of this as the back of the light, I just kind of color it out, and then I put an arrow from the middle. And that's kind of how I figure out that's how I shorthand my little light bulb. So if we're considering this our standard for this exercise, uh, we're going to vary the direction somewhere along this angle, and we can put it right. I'll draw my little light bulb for you guys. So the light's coming in this way. Which would put our highlight right about here. I was going to do a very, very complicated one, but I don't think I will for this exercise. And it would put our shadow or our midpoint on our sphere where it starts casting a shadow on itself. Somewhere about there. And then the shadow behind it is going to be going out a bit longer where we've got this one coming. But for the most part, it'll just be coming off the edges here. If you'd like to challenge yourself, if you find this one's a little bit too easy, feel free to put it from the back and let me know how that goes for you. I don't think there's too many people that actually enjoy backlighting. If I do a class specifically on lighting, we will hit backlighting, and it will probably be entirely its own class. Now we're going to vary the height. So you know what? Let's do this. We've got it from the front. Actually, we'll do it from the variants from our standard. We're going to go bottom up. And we're going to have to pretend that it's not sitting on anything anymore. But we're still kind of seeing this sphere from the top, right? So our highlight's going to be more oblong. Oh, actually, it would still be fairly circular because sphere. Just be squished a little bit to follow the curvature of the sphere. Bean. There we go. And then our shadow would be curving this way instead. So we're pretty much reversing our shadow and our light. So now our light's coming, leaving this white because it's coming from this direction. So it is kind of slightly back, but not too much. I'm going to draw a little bit at the back of the sphere too, just so I can keep track of it. Those drawing lines, whatever makes it easier for you to read. And then let's do an intensity variance. So let's say this light is, and I do my intensity variance by drawing my light really narrow or by drawing it really big. Actually, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to go from here and it's going to be like right against the sphere. So our highlight is going to be super hot, super sharp, and then we're going to have a lot of darks going on. So you can take your uh, shading method of choice. We're going to really quickly shade these in. Oh, oh, okay. Well, that explains a lot. Put it on normal, please. So I'm going to use just a really quick tonal because we're going to take these onto a portrait. I think we're only going to have time to do little bits of a face, so we'll start it off, and then if you guys would like to finish it, we can definitely do that. But the one I'm going to be using is on the lessons and resources page, and it's 2.1 layer blending mode base from the Intro to Digital Arts, which was this image. And we're going to be shading it in these four variances. Oh, and then because I clicked out of Photoshop, it's doing its thing. One thing to be aware of when you're shading from a reference image is, especially if you're using a photographer's work, is be very cautious that photographers have access to a lot of various light techniques. So there might not be one solid lighting source, um, which, especially if you're doing it for your own character or a character in a scene, that can start throwing you a couple of loops when you go to put it in. So that's kind of one of the reasons why we're looking at a couple different lighting directions. So that way, hopefully, you can start looking at your references and start being able to identify where the lighting sources are coming from. One of the other reasons why I'm not doing backlighting is, especially since we're going to be doing a portrait with skin, there's a lighting effect called subsurface scattering that takes quite a while to get the hang of. And when we jump into it, I can kind of show you what subsurface scattering means. But if you've ever held your hand up to a really intense light bulb, and you can kind of see like the light coming through the outer edges of your skin, but not the middle part where there's bone and tissue, thicker tissue. That's your skin bouncing around the lighting beneath the surface. Just gonna erase that little arrow so I can still kind of see what's going on. This one's going to be a little bit more fun because it is a slight backlight angle, and we're gonna have a lot of dark going on. Don't be afraid to use your darks. Probably not that much dark, but let me turn on my navigator so you can kind of watch what I'm doing. So I can watch what I'm doing. And do we got any questions so far while I'm thinking about it? On anything I might have been describing poorly? I've totally been on the wrong layer, but whatever. It's not too big of a deal. Ooh, that one went a little bit light. And since this is such a dark heavy image, I'm just going to keep throwing in darks and building that up. So it should be almost opposite that one, just from the other direction. So, and then because this one is very intense light, there's going to be a lot of really dark shadow. So this midpoint that I had kind of started doing here, I don't want it to go too much past that getting lighter, if at all. I do still want that shadow to fade in at least a little bit. And then because I'm working on a gray background, I'm actually going to, just to really showcase how strong this light is, highlight's going to be, as we call it, super hot, is where your is how close your highlight gets to white. Might actually follow the curvature of the ball here. Mm, Doesn't look right because it's a sphere, so it's supposed to have just a solid. It's not reflecting anything, so my highlight shouldn't change size. If we want, we can draw the. So when your light's super close to that, your shadow is going to be super long, depending on where your lighting is. I actually don't think I can draw a long enough shadow, so I'm just going to. And I like to leave a little bit of a gap just so I can see what's going on. You're more than welcome to block that out. That particular line is just my visual style. If we were to get really into it, everything back here is going to be likely really, if this is our only light source. If there's another light source going on, then it might not be so dark. Behind this orb, you can just fade out that uh, contour line as you see fit. So we've got what's kind of considered the standard light. Uh, we've changed the direction, we changed the height, and we changed the intensity. What time do we got? 22:06. Okay, so this one's gonna run a little bit long today. Hopefully everyone's okay with that. Uh, shrink this down and give me my navigator. As you can see, I've still got my color line art effects going.